Hi, everybody. Welcome to Making Money as a Freelance Writer with me, Lauren Marie Fleming, and Hadassah Damien. Welcome, welcome. This is part of the Happy Writers Day series, which is part of our massive giveaway where you can win over $2,000 in coaching and courses from experts like me and Hadassah. And our goal is to get you to write this winter. And so that's our goal. And we want to do that by giving you these free workshops and by giving you a bunch of courses and coaching. So go to happywriterdays.com to see the other workshops and to enter to win over $2,000 in coaching and courses. A little personal note before we get started. I'm actually in Southern California and there are fires raging. I am not personally right now near a fire, so I am safe, but I am in a very high level, high alert zone. So the fire marshal told us to put all our stuff in the car. So all my stuff's ready in the car if I need to go. But because of that, I am going to be checking my phone for alerts throughout the time. And if I got to go, I got to go. But hopefully, because there's not currently a fire in my direct path, we will be able to make it through this. But I thought I'd warn everybody and putting a little reality sometimes to the conversation. But Hadassah is in New York, so you are very safe from fires right now, right?
I am 100% safe from fires. It might snow tomorrow, as a matter of fact. That's how safe I am from fire. Yes.
Well, there you go. Send some of that snow our way. We could really use it.
Would love to. God.
Yeah.
So Lauren, I'm so excited to get to pick your brain and like have a sort of merging of our two thoughtful minds on the topic of freelance writers and money and how the money part works, because you and I have had parts of this conversation before, and I'm so excited to give some information to folks who are listening and watching this later, and also just to like get to dive in with you more because you know so much about this topic, and and I come at it from a holistic finances perspective. So I think we're really going to like come out with some good stuff today.
Yeah, I love that we like cross over and come at it the same point from different angles. So I'm really excited about this conversation. And on another personal note, Hadassah is actually my personal money coach. So I really, really trust and believe in the progressive, kind of anti-capitalistic, helpful, how do you work within the system if you hate it? Like, how do you work within a system that you dislike and that's flawed, that's kind of set up against you sometimes? And so that's why I wanted to bring you, because creatives aren't, like, let's talk about that starving artist cliche right off the bat. There's this idea that to be an artist, you have to starve and suffer, and because of that, we often have this societal idea that art isn't worthy of like investing your time, money, or energy in. So what do you think about the starving artist cliche?
Oh my gosh, Lauren, you just brought up so many worthwhile things to unpack. So so thank you so much for doing that. I mean, part of the reason that I actually even got into doing personal finance work and small business finance work with people is because I am an artist and a small business owner, and I've always seen myself as a combination of the two. And so sometimes those small businesses were artistic and creative, and sometimes my small businesses were ways to undergird my artistic and creative work, right? To find some other financial cash flow so that I could just do whatever I wanted creatively in the world. And I think it's so interesting to me to think about the history of where this like starving artist cliche comes from, because I think there's a whole bunch of things that are in there, right? And you touched on one where it's like there's this kind of like this sense that like if you have to do with the arts, like you're dealing with capital A art, some like platonic ideal that's like untouched by the the filthiness that is the coin, right? Like you're in the church, you're not in the you're not on the steps, and look, I believe in the church of art and the church of writing and the church of creativity, absolutely. There's an amazing like healing and spiritual property to bringing our creative selves to the forefront. But the other reality is that we've always lived in a physical presence reality, right? Like artists have bodies. Those bodies are in the physical reality of whatever world that we're in, right? And so for a lot of the people who are watching this, or for folks that we know, we're talking about folks in the US, Canada, Western Europe, like folks who are in the Western world, which means that we are in a capitalist system, right? Which means that we need resources often money, to be able to take care of ourselves, whether that's to make sure we have the homes we need and want, the food we need and want, and the other things that make life comfortable, if not at least have our needs covered, right? And so there's something in there for me about like a mental separation of art existing in one place and our bodies existing in the other, that I think as feminists and as people who are confronting patriarchal ideas of the separation of our minds and bodies, that we just need to like let that go, right? Like our bodies and our minds live in the same place, and we acknowledge that these amazing, awesome bodies that we have that create the artistic work that we want to put in the world need things. And in this physical present of now, that means that we need resources and money to make sure we have what we want, right? So there's this like old history ideas, classed ideas, you know, things out of academia that actually just don't serve writers or artists when we start to unpack what's underneath them, right? I could go on and on about this, you know, but like
I love it.
But I think that's the undergirding, right? There's this idea that it's noble to struggle, right? And I mean, as writers, like, you know, like Charles Dickens, I think, wrote a lot about the noble struggle, right? If we look at like pre-modernist writers, there's a whole, you can do an entire undergraduate degree in the modern struggle, right? I perhaps did.
I was gonna say, are you speaking from experience?
Yes, I am. Right, so I think that the idea that like struggle is somehow noble is all, you know, ennobling and like sort of like purifies your ideas, is also tied into a whole bunch of really like classed ideas and classed experiences that maybe make for really powerful narratives, but don't make for really great lives. You know, and again, back to like the physical, real presence and reality of now, artists, writers, creatives, we got to think about how we're making this whole thing work, right? Like reality check, you know, artists need healthcare and good food like everybody else, and we don't have to struggle to be awesome creatives in the world. And I want to get that message across clearly.
Yeah, I love that, because I think after Trump got elected, there was a lot of backlash. I keep thinking about the backlash of people being like, well, at least there'll be beautiful art now. And I'm like, I'm tired of my friends creating art from struggle. Like imagine we create beautiful art out of struggle, but imagine if we could create art out of like joy and art out of a place where we aren't worried about like starving. What would your art and your craft look like if you had space for it? If you created space for it in your life, if you had a budget for it, what would that look like? And that's one of the reasons why I love talking with you. And I love to teach kind of business basics and these left brain things, because a lot of times people will approach art from the right brain, from this creative space, and they forget that they sometimes need to bring the logical in to support that creative. And without that logical base, without that support, it's difficult to make time and space and money and energy and everything and resources. Like, how do you print the paper? Like, how do you buy the journal? How do you buy the painting supplies? Like, these are things you have to have the logistical, and like, how are you going to make time in your life? So I think that where's the resources going to come, both time, money, and energy for you to create? And that's why I wanted to bring you in to talk about making money as a freelancer and what does that mean. And one thing I really want to emphasize before we go on is we're talking about kind of a side hustle right now. So if you are a full-time writer, you're probably not on this workshop. You're probably not on this workshop right now. If everything's going great for you and you're making all the money you want in the world, you're probably going out and making that money, not here on the workshop. So we want to talk about this idea of kind of a creative side hustle, which is a great way to start as a freelancer. So you aren't just quitting your day job tomorrow, although if that works for you, get it. But what we're doing is we're talking about how to add something to your life so you can take that step towards where you want to be. And to do that, I want to emphasize that there's also this idea that if you're not a legitimate writer, if you're not a full-time writer, if you have a day job. So as Hadassah brought up, who was it they were saying was also a physicist?
Kurt Vonnegut. Amazing, gifted, brilliant writer, multiple books, worked as a physicist until he was 60.
Yeah. And most of the writers that I know uh, don't make money off of their writing. I know New York Times best-selling authors that they don't support themselves off of their book sales. They support themselves off speaking gigs and teaching and the various things they do around it. So I think that the number one misconception that I want people to think of right now is that your money has to just come from writing. But it can come from writing and it can come from freelancing, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about today.
Totally. I mean, I think something that I like to bring into the space, and I talk with a lot of freelancers, whether it's people who, have, entire careers doing client-facing work or side hustles in health, wellness, writing, arts, etc. And I think you touched on something that I really like to bring up, which is like, you have to have some kind of plan. Right? You have to have some kind of plan. And I know from talking with a lot of people about money, just saying you have to have a plan can be a real like confusing, overwhelming, like, well, how do I do that kind of statement? So we're going to unpack that a little bit, but I really want to go back to this idea of like, you can make any kind of art that you want to make. You can bring and please do bring whatever you want to bring into the world. And it's only going to be stronger, and you're only going to have a more easeful time of doing it if you have a plan around it on how you're going to support it financially, but also how you're going to support it in terms of your energy, your health and well-being. Right? To me, the financial aspect is one arm of like the overall like self-care structures that we can build into the creative work we want to put into the world, or side hustles that we put together to make ourselves more financially sustained.
Fabulous. So we're going to get in that was our introduction. We're about to get into the meat of this workshop. If you have any questions for us and you're watching us live on the Happy Writer Days website, there is a chat box about that way, maybe that way, that you can ask your questions. And we also have a worksheet for you that's below. And if you happen upon this on YouTube and you want to get that workshop, you can grab it at happywriterdays.com. You don't need that workshop to keep going, but it will be helpful for you to continue after this. It'll have your major takeaways, some links to resources, and some really great action points for you. So make sure you download that worksheet right below us, or if you can get it also at happywriterdays.com. Okay, so let's talk about why money is complicated. So we're going to delve into money, and it can sometimes feel painful to people. And why is it complicated, and how can you help break that down so you're willing to look at it? You address this a little bit. It can be sometimes hard to even think about money and to think about making a plan because it can feel so overwhelming.
Totally. It's so true. And something I've observed, Lauren, and having spent the last couple of years talking to like all kinds of people, who are creatives and weirdos, like about their experiences with money, is that it doesn't matter what your money background is or what your current money experience is, because in terms of having confusion or having some feelings like you might not be doing money right. And to me, there's almost like a universal experience of people who have internalized that. And when I observe something that's so universal, I start to think there's a pattern here, right? This isn't like an individual failing that anyone has, personally done something. No, as a matter of fact, there's like there's an overarching cultural narrative that each of us are not doing money right. And it's part of how our system functions, in my opinion, right? Is that if each of us feels like we have to be doing something better or working harder or more deeply with it, that and feeling a little bit like confused or ashamed or weirded out or just unsure of ourselves, that instead of engaging and finding answers to the questions that we might have about money, we might find ourselves sort of like closing up or not finding the answers that we need, right? And I think that there's like an interlocking system here that really is not helpful for any of us, especially any of us who experience any kind of marginalization, right, around economics and otherwise. So I think there's a whole bunch of like shame and silence values that are at play that go across class and race lines. And then of course people have their own specific situations, right? like there are many people who have trauma around money, right? Whether that is around experiencing debt and like the trauma that goes around that, or you know, everybody's family is their own kind of weird about money. It's like something I like to say.
I love that. Every family is their own kind of weird, especially about money. Love it.
Yes, true. You know, right? So, and for some people that means like holding trauma about like how they relate to money, like from our families. Thanks guys. Thanks mom and dad. You know, and then there's also just straight up, there is a lack of education around finances. Like even here in the US, right? We go through high school, we learn math and social studies and English and fine subjects, but we don't learn about this thing that we use every day that informs our everyday realities, money, right? Like that's handed off to these professionals who then put a bunch of acronyms on it and make it sound kind of inaccessible when really it's not, you know, like money, finances, economics, it's merely a system, right? And I'll say this here in the video to you, but I'm like, look, real talk. If all of those like basic white men can learn how money works, so can you, right? It's not actually that hard. It's, you know, so, but we're not taught it, right? So it's not naturalized. And so I think there's like a whole bunch of things that are at play to make money feel complicated, along with this whole idea that like, well, if I'm an artist and I'm good, people will just shower me with money. That's not how it works, right? If you're an artist and you're good, people might shower you with money, but you could be an amazing, talented artist, and it's other things have to be in place, right? Things that you put in place and things that fate puts in place, right? For the money to start flowing like we might imagine in our wildest art dreams. Yeah, and I think, you know, I think money is also complicated. One more thing on it is that like, is that to me, there's also, as artists, there's like this lack of belief in ourselves that comes in, right? Where we're like, oh, well, maybe I'm not going to be very good at this. So instead of figuring out all of the undergirding parts to make it possible, I'm just going to self-sabotage by not figuring out the money part, and then blame the part where I'm not succeeding on the money when I didn't give it attention, right? Like there's this like lack of self-belief, self-sabotage thing. I think that can also happen. And to me, like one way to really push back against that is to say like, no, like I believe in myself. I believe in this project and the work that I'm doing. And I'm going to give like every piece of this the attention that it deserves so I can have like the best possible chance of my creativity being sustainable out in the world, because each of our voices deserves that, right? As writers, we each have our own unique way of seeing things that the world desperately needs, right? Therefore, our projects absolutely deserve that kind of support that we can put in place for it.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree with you. I find that people who are in marginalized communities, people who have been silenced in other aspects of their life, often don't want to think about finances as well, because it can feel overwhelming, because it's another way in which they've been silenced, and they've been like put down and told that they weren't allowed to have it. Like you're not allowed to be successful. So you kind of put your head in the sand because you're not allowed it. So you don't want to look at it. You don't want to like see this thing that you're not allowed. You want to kind of put it to the side. And so that brings me to my next question, which is, how can we make money less painful? And my suggestion that I always tell the people who take my classes and take my coaching is to look at your numbers, to just really be transparent with where you are and what you need, which is why I have a calculator that you all can get in the worksheet, a link to, that's like, how much do I need to charge? Like, really, can I afford to take a $50 writing piece that takes me 2 weeks? Maybe not. It depends on what your finances are like. So understanding what you need to get per hour helps you to like looking at those numbers. I think about the things that we're afraid of. Like I wrote a book about body image, and I asked people while I wrote my body love book, what are you afraid of? Like, what's the worst that could happen? And people were so afraid of what could possibly happen. And then they try that thing, and then they would find out that, you know, they wore a bikini on the beach and they didn't die. and they didn't have everyone laugh at them. They didn't have all these things in their head. And so I think that in the way that we want to face our fears in other parts of our life, like knowledge is power when it comes to money and when it comes to creativity. And like, I want to get positive feedback from editors on my piece to make it better. And I want to understand where my novel might need work. I also need to understand where like my business side needs work. So that's how I personally tell people to help make money less painful, is to really like lean into the fear. Understand where that fear is coming from, journal through it, and then look at the numbers. So what do you suggest for helping make money less painful?
Lauren, I love what you suggested. And I think that yes, do what Lauren says. Journal through it, understand like what's behind your block, and then put a strategy in place. I always like to say every strategy is a good strategy, as long as you're using one, right? Pick something and do it, right? And I think again, like especially for artists and creatives and writers, here's a framework that might be really helpful for people, which is to think about how like part of our work as cultural workers and creative makers in the world is to reveal, right? To reveal truths, to reveal stories, and to shift culture and society. And there was a study that came out a year or two ago that said that people would rather talk about the private details of their sex lives than talk about their financial lives. What that says to me is, number one, like, good job, all of the people who have done so much work, right, to make sexuality something that we can talk about, all genders of people can talk about. And that there's like a place that we can still dig into, right? And I think there's a revolutionary aspect of pulling the silence curtain back, as it were, and talking about economic realities and talking about finances. And so just like putting that framework on it can allow you to do, to take on Lauren's really great advice, which is to be really specific and start talking about the money, start trying to figure out what it is that you need in terms of finances. And I think it's very, very important to be very specific on coming up with numbers that represent what you are going for in your business and what you need overall in your life as a financial support. Why do I think that? Again, because our brains, our wonderful human brains, are little narrative making machines, right? Like, we love details, we love specifics, and we hang on to details. As writers, we know this. And there's a psychological function to this. It's called anchoring. Our brains anchor to details. So when we give ourselves specific numbers, whether that's like a goal of money that we want to hit, right, and some sort of earnings, or whether that's like a specific number on like, here's the amount of money that I need to be okay, here's the amount of money that is my budget, we give ourselves the power of the detail, and we give ourselves the power of filling in an unknown into our narrative. And our brains, we function so much better with details and with knowns, because we can start to work with them, and we can start to work with things that are actually relevant and relatable to us. So if we say things to ourselves like, oh yeah, I need to make some money, that's not specific enough. If we say to ourselves, I need to make $800, then we're getting more specific, right? We're starting on the path towards how we're actually going to get there, because we're putting information into our minds to start working on, and we're giving ourselves something that we can start working on, right? So it's, and so there's something in there about being realistic, right? And there's also something in there just about like giving yourself a structure, because then you get to say, okay, like, no matter what I feel about money, which is valid, and I'm going to honor it and do the work the way I do to deal with that. I'll, do that work, kind of put it here. Great. Now I'm going to start dealing with the money and start talking about the finances and actually like working on the numbers a little bit. And that probably leads us into what we're going to talk about in a minute. And I'll tell you all in a sec. I'm going to walk you through a calculator that I have that I think marries really well with Lauren's. That's about some of these like higher level numbers and understanding them in the whole context of our freelance lives.
So yeah, that's a great transition. What we're going to talk about next is really how much you need to make as a freelancer. How much money do you need to make this work? And we're going to keep talking about two calculators, and we have links to both of these for you so you can get them in your worksheet. And one is in my Jumpstart Your Writing Career course, and it is a calculator that I call your plan to quit your day job. And for those who haven't seen it yet, it really breaks down, okay, if you want to make $60,000 a year, let's just like, that's a really good base, living well life. What does that mean? What does that look like if you're selling $200 products? What does that look like if you're selling $2,000 products or $20 products? And how do you, or a mix of the two, and how do you actually get to those goals? So and what does that look like hourly? So if I'm trying to sell coaching, writing coaching, I need to know that I can't charge under like, whatever, it's going to be $50 for some people. It's going to be $150 for some people. It's going to be $1,500 for other people. So it's not like we can tell you have to make X, Y, and Z. It's about knowing what you need to make. So that's my calculator. My calculator helps you figure out what you need to charge for different products and what it looks like if you charge 200 versus 20 and what that looks like for you in terms of time to write. So Hadassah, before we start, do you want to talk a little bit about your calculator? So when we're referencing these, people understand if they haven't downloaded the link yet, what we're talking about?
Absolutely. So yes, the calculator that I've built is great for writers. It's great for dog walkers, product sellers, people who do client work. It's really for freelancers in general, for anyone who makes money that comes in that doesn't already have the taxes taken out.
Dog walkers, anyone that's dog walker watching, hello. I just shout out to the dog walker.
shout out to the acupuncturists. Shout out to the yoga instructors who are
shout out to the writers who have those as their side jobs and they're watching this. That's a freelancing right there too.
Yeah, that's a great hookup. So here's the thinking, right? Lauren walked you through this, her calculator, which lets you kind of get really granular. Okay, I'm going, I want to have like one column a month that might bring in $300. I want to, sell, X number of ebooks a month. Maybe that'll bring in $500. Da 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 da. You kind of do some Jenga, right, on like what your sales might look like, and you come up with some number. You're like, okay, this is what I might need to do to make, say, $1,000 a month. And so then you kind of go over to my calculator. What my calculator does is it walks you through the steps of, okay, when I have $1,000 a month, what do my finances look like? What's actually happening there? Because when we're freelancers, and for those of you who haven't started getting paid for writing or as a freelancer yet, there's a couple things that go on, nothing to worry about, just things to be aware of. When we get money that doesn't have the taxes taken out already, we have to pay taxes on that money, right? Which means if you were to get $1,000 for your freelance work, your writing work, your dog walking, whatever, you actually have to put some of that money aside so that you can give it back up the pipeline. So say you have $1,000 and this calculator does some like rough estimating for people at different tax rates. So if you make less money, you're taxed less. If you make more money, you're taxed more. Everyone's going to be a little bit different on this. The calculator gives you like a guesstimate. But say you make $1,000, say 200 of it needs to go to taxes. Maybe you earned $1,000, but you don't have $1,000. You have $800, right? And that kind of thinking is reverse engineering, essentially. So the calculator also lets you put in an account for the very normal things that when we're freelancers writing, getting paid for writing, getting paid for other types of gigs, we have to spend money to make that money. So whether that's going to a conference, having a writing coach, taking a course, getting a writing book, paying for printing, et cetera, if you're being paid for doing something and you have to pay money to be able to do that thing, you are not taxed on the money you had to pay. So you kind of have this little circular thing happening. Maybe I bring in $1,000, but I pay out $300 to my writing coach and to go to a conference in town and to get some printing. So now I have $700 left. I'm going to get taxed on that. Well, maybe I have to pay $150 in tax. So I have less tax that I pay out because I already used some of that money for other things completely legitimately for the work I have to do, right? And now what do I have? $550. So I got $1,000, but I put $550 in my wallet. And I think that's the number that I really want freelancers and people who are paid without having the taxes taken out to be able to understand, because I have seen far too many of my like beloved creative friends not quite totally get that part and have a really unhappy experience come April 15th tax day when they go to sort all of their paperwork and find, oh my gosh, I owe money I didn't realize. And that's why I walk people so clearly through this, because I want nobody to be surprised and everyone to be ready to write that check when it's time. And so this calculator really helps you plan the money that's coming in, what I have to spend on my expenses, what's got to go to taxes, and then what goes into my wallet. And that helps you reverse engineer, because it might make you realize, more than one person has realized this using this calculator, oh, I can't charge $50 for my coaching. I'm not going to have enough money after everything else is sorted. I really need to charge $100, you know? And so then you go back to the awesome calculator Lauren made, and you're like, well, what happens when I like turn up the cost of these things? Or if I do more of some of these other things? Okay, maybe now I'm making $1,500. I sort it and I realize that's how I end up with $1,000 in my wallet. So it's this kind of thinking that, yes, it's like super left brain, it's super logical, but this is how you like put in a really strong undergirding so that you know you are set for the creative work to flow. No more stress and worrying blocking your creativity. You know what's happening underneath, so you can continue to move forward.
Well, and you touched on this just a little bit, but I want to encourage people. I think that creativity kind of plays into money making. So I like to think of my business as like a book. I'm building it like a book. It has a look, it has a feel, it has a narrative. It has, like, I write on similar topics, so it has a through line. It has some fun built in. I like to make spreadsheets. I like to change the colors on them. I like to plug in these numbers and think. I like to make courses. And so I'd love to kind of get into a discussion with you about how creativity plays into all of this. So we're both creatives who also really enjoy hanging out in the left brain too. And what ways do you feel like creativity, I like to think that creatives are actually better at money than they give themselves credit for, because we are creative. Because what is an entrepreneur but a creative, but somebody who has created something? And so I really love to encourage people to think of themselves as a creative entrepreneur, to kind of get rid of that starving artist idea, because we have everything. Like, we have the number one thing you need to be financially successful, and that's creativity, I think. And so what are your thoughts on money and creativity?
I love this topic. Yes. I mean, I think one thing to me that I observe creatives doing that I identify with strongly myself is I love to have like a bunch of different little things, and they're probably connected by a narrative through line, but there's more than one thing happening, right? And so as a creative, that actually gives me an opportunity to have a couple different products, if you will, right? And I get to be in charge of, like, if I want those products to be super financially viable, less financially viable, right? It's like, because there's a couple different things going on, it actually gives creatives way more flexibility, because we get to build a couple different items into our lives. And I think that that's really, that's also a framework that can be really helpful for creatives. We're not like stuck trying to figure out how to make money. No, that's like that's not a very enlivening way of thinking about it. We actually get to decide all the different ways that we're going to put sustainability and resources into our lives. So I really want to give that framing, And I think too, like, as creatives, say that you have 3 different projects you're working on. You could say, you know what, one of these projects like is not going to make me money, and I know that, and I'm just like already saying like that's fine. This product or project needs to be in the world. It's really, really important to me. It's passionate to me. Like, okay, right. This project, $0, 25 hours. Okay, that's what goes in. Like that's what goes in and comes out in terms of just this economy of money and time. Obviously, there's more to it than that. Okay, other project, maybe like $100 comes in and $10 goes out. Great. Now I know. Maybe there's another project. It's like, all right, $3,000 comes in, 20 hours goes out. When you look at the whole ecosystem, you're like, okay, well, there's a 50-hour work week and I made $3,100. Okay, or like there's, 50 hours of my creative work time and this is the ecosystem that's created. So I think as creatives, we get to build this. We get to decide, and there's something too for me about creatives and like wanting to find, so in some of the work that I do with people thinking about how to make their work, no matter what it is, financially viable, we have this idea that's called product market fit. It's like very business world language. I'm bringing it in. I hope you all don't hate it. But it really is just this idea of like, I've got a thing. Have I found people who want this thing? That's it. And people who feel that thing has a value that I agree with, right? Maybe people are like, oh, that thing looks great. I'll give you $1 for it. And you're like, I really want $10 for it. You haven't quite found fit, So again, as creatives, we get to test things and try things and see, yes, this is working. It's getting me what I want. It's getting me, social opportunity or speaking opportunity, right? That is a value we get to assign to some work. Maybe to another piece of work, we're like, I want this piece of work to bring me like financial remuneration. So you kind of go try a couple things until you find how to make that fit. And Lauren, I just love what you said. Like as creative people, like we get to be flexible. We're makers. We can decide that we want to not check in with the world and suffer in silence, or we can do better for ourselves and the things that we want to bring to the world and be in a process of creative checking in with ourselves and the world that we're communicating with, in and out and back and forth. Not only do we get to have, more people and more engagement with our work, which to me is a really core value as an artist, but we also get to see what's working and if the criteria that we've defined for ourselves that we want our work to be bringing into our lives is working for us.
Yeah, I love that you touched on that, like deciding if something is even going to bring you money. So I like to talk to people. I actually had to quit making money off of my writing. So even if the ultimate plan is to sell it, I have to write a piece without any intention of selling it, because I found that when I was writing to sell, not to tell, I was a shitty writer. Was a really crappy writer. So even in my marketing, even if my ultimate goal is to like sell one of my expensive high-end courses or get someone at my retreat, that like marketing copy, I'm still telling a story. I still have to start with giving myself permission to write something simply because I'm a writer and I want to write. And one way I did this is I started journaling every day. And it was so hard for me because I was used to blogging, because you're putting it out there, or you're like Instagramming or Facebooking and you're putting content out there for other people than to like come to you. And there was a consumption by others of it. And so I started writing just for me. I started journaling just for me. I started writing. Everything I wrote is now just for me. My books, I don't ever have to sell them. I don't ever have to make a dime off of them. My articles, I don't ever have to sell them. They can go on my site for free. So when I used to be solely just making money, pitching places for freelancing, it really was not working for my creativity. and it really wasn't working for my company. So I had to revamp my company to be selling something else and have my writing be an added bonus money come in. So I still do freelancing. I still pitch to places. I still make money off of my writing, but it's not my sole source of income anymore. I got creative in like where I brought my money in and how it came in and diversified that. So it wasn't that I had to write what people wanted to read. I could write what I wanted to write and then sell it. So I had to write, I now get to write what I need to tell, and then I find a place to sell it to. And so if writing to sell isn't working for you, and you know, copywriting and certain types of writing to sell can really actually make you a lot of money. So there are freelancers that live in that world of like writing to sell. But for me, it didn't work. So if it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that you can't make money off of your writing. But if you write it first, because like something you need to say is going to sell better than something that you're trying to just sell. So I try to tell people to write to tell, not to sell. And also to think of writing and all these other things as creativity. And also to give yourself permission to not make money off of all of your writing. Like your journaling doesn't have to make money. You can do writing just for the sake of writing. So now after we've talked about like, you're allowed to make money, you're allowed to make money, I also want to tell you, you're allowed to not make money off of your writing if that's not serving you, and to make money elsewhere or around your writing. So when I talk to freelancers, I also tell them to think about like what's adjacent to your writing. So I teach courses, I have retreats, that's adjacent to my writing. So if you're not able to find enough freelance writing gigs, and I guess this is a good time to say I have a link in that worksheet that you can download below this video or at happywriterdays.com. That's a list of places that will accept your pitches and pay you for them, no matter what your experience as a writer. So there are places that will pay you really well to write to them. But I want to also encourage you to think about making money adjacent to your writing, and to think about writing first and foremost with like a prompt in mind maybe, but no need to sell it. So you're writing to tell the story you need to tell and then to sell it.
Yes, that is 100% true. And that is I think about the visual art world, where I have a lot of friends and colleagues who make gorgeous, beautiful pieces of whether it's like sculpture, fiber art, what have you, where they actually find their sustainability as like art teachers, right? Or art critics. And that income allows them to be able to have time to do artwork, right? And I think that absolutely that's so important if you're thinking about the whole ecosystem. And Lauren, what you said is so important. There are 100% that it is 100% valid to decide to say, I'm going to get a day job and let somebody else figure out all my health insurance and all this other stuff. And then I have energy to just write and tell the story I want to tell, right? That is a valid writer's choice. You know, any strategy is a good strategy, right? When you're thinking about how you want to make writing sustainable for you. And as creatives, we deserve to give ourselves the creativity to say, how am I going to make this work, right?
Yeah. We have a few questions and comments in the chat that I wanted to address. So cool. Someone said, what you just said, Lauren, about making money off of other things other than your writing makes so much sense to me. I'm glad that resonated. Somebody asked, Hadassah, what are your personal finance books? What are the personal finance books that have personally helped you the most?
Yes. Oh,
that's a great question. I want to know that too.
Yes, I'm happy to answer that question. I'm actually gonna lead it with a reveal, because I'm working on a personal finance book right now.
Yay!
I'm so excited. Yes, indeed. I was just telling Lauren earlier, I'm at 40,000 words, but first, before that whole book comes out, I'm about to release 2 chapters of it in a segmented book called Hacking Capitalism, which is money mindset and 10 tactics to make your financial future work better for you. So that will be forthcoming. But books that I've read that I've really liked, I'm in my journey to like go from thinking that I was always going to have to make something out of nothing to figuring out how to make something out of something. Part of my work has just been to like think about bigger numbers of money as just like normal things that I could have in my bank account. and that helped me make it possible and make choices for that to now be reality for me, right? So books that I've really liked on that path, there's a writer called, and so many personal finance books like Community Warning are like very much about like middle-class people with middle-class salary jobs who are in nuclear heterosexual families. So that is the sort of default assumed audience for many of these books. So that is the default assumed audience for these. But that said, Barbara Stanny wrote this book called Overcoming Underearning. And she also wrote a book called Secrets of Six-Figure Women, both of which were really interesting
to me. Can you spell that last name?
Yeah, Stanny.
Thank you.
Totally, yeah. And she, yeah, has like a really specific take, but I enjoyed The Secrets of Six-Figure Women because I actually learned how women just make six figures. I would love that for myself. I have put into my mind that I'm on my way there, so I can be on my way there, right? I also really like a book by Brent Kessel, Kessel, called It's Not About the Money. And he is a certified financial planner and also a practicing Buddhist. And so he has this like really amazing way of combining like a values-driven approach to understanding these different financial archetypes. So it's like find your archetype, sort of like align your values with that archetype of how you relate to money. And then the last two chapters are just like really solid financial advice on investing. Like it's good. It's really good. And Suze Orman, good old Susie Orman, God bless her, has some great books, but I really like her book that is, it's not her book, it's her 201 book that is title, but she's also got some good stuff out there. So there are some good finance writers. And I also like to shout out, there's a blogger called Tiffany the Budgetnista, who just has this like rabid fan of followers, or like all these followers. It's like hundreds of thousands of people in her Facebook group. And she's really great, but her Facebook group, I'm never gonna run a Facebook group, so I'm happy to send you all over there. It's just like women who are like constantly shouting out and supporting each other. It's incredible. It's like, I paid this off. I bought my first house. You know, like I'm gonna figure out how to get out of debt. It's like beautiful. So I follow them. And then I also follow a blog that I really like is Mr. Money Mustache. And that gets into this idea of financial independence. And it's thinking about that I actually, like, as just a person with a job, save enough so that I can stop working.
It froze a bit. Would you mind saying the name of that blog again?
Yeah, it is Mr. Money Mustache. And that kind of brings you into like a whole other world of rabid fans of people who are like, in one way, are really like, capitalism is a chumps game. And we're going to play the game and get ahead, you know, and it's very interesting. And there's a lot of privilege in those groups and a lot of acknowledgement of the privilege in those groups. So it's, and it's very much like minimalist, anti-consumerist, right? Like ride bikes, why are you in a car? It's very interesting to me just in terms of like how you can navigate this economic world, which is something I teach and talk about a lot. So there's that. And then I also have a bunch of things on my blog, which is Ride Free Fearless Money. And you can get a free money cleanse course, right? If you just want to like get started and like begin to acclimate into some of the thinking that can kind of help you begin to transform how you relate to money.
That's great. And it kind of leads me a little bit into this, the next question that we got in the chat is, are there any resources that can help us know if we are being fairly and equitably paid for our writing? I ask this in hope of being able to close the gender income gap. I'd like to go back to what we were talking about, the calculators. I know we keep being like, do the calculators, know the numbers, but I think fair and equitable is going to change for each person and each situation. So there are times where I'm more than happy to write something for free because it's a person or a cause I care about, or because it's going to get me a ton of exposure. And I am one of those people who thinks that you should never ask someone to write for exposure, because exposure doesn't pay the bills. But there are times where I have been able to have a piece that got to 1 million people. I don't have 1 million followers. And so if this piece is sent out to 1 million people and they're all linked back to my website, then that's going to, and they all are entering in like a sales funnel of mine that's going to eventually try to get money. That's eventually going to get me to make money. So understanding the way your business needs to make money and where it doesn't need to make money is going to help make sure that you're fair and equitable. I also like to say that I was taught in law school that a majority of men ask for more than they're offered, and almost no women ask for more than they're offered. So I always make sure that I ask for a little bit more than the going rate. I don't always get it, but I always ask for it. And that meant, so when I had my Vice column, I got, I got double the amount that they normally sold somebody because I asked for it. So it's worth asking for. And those books that you suggested, I think those are also really great resources for understanding your money, and understanding what you're worth and what you need to make will help to close that gap. Okay, well,
yes,
we are over time. So do you have any last little bits that you want to say? Where can we find you? Where can we get more of your resources? There is the worksheet that you can download below, or if you're finding this on YouTube, at happywriterdays.com. The link is also in the show notes for this. And you can get the link to a bunch of resources when you download the worksheet. But what is the best way for people to keep in touch with you and to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my blog is ridefreefearlessmoney.com. Tons of resources, free downloads, e-courses, online courses, and one-on-one coaching for individuals, small business owners, and couples. I'm actually about to be releasing a couples finances online course at the end of the year. Hacking Capitalism book that's coming out in another. So that's the best place to find me. So fearlessmoney.com. I'm on Facebook, and I love getting to like unpack like progressive intersectional thinking, and that has brought the coolest people into my field, Lauren.
Yay! And I'm so glad that you were able to come on. If you would like to learn more from my end, I have a free Jumpstart Your Writing Career course at laurenmariefleming.com/jumpstart. That's also in the show notes of this video and linked to in your worksheet. Thank you so much, Hadassah, for coming on. And be sure, everybody, to enter to win free course from Hadassah and 2 free courses from me at happywriterdays.com. We have over $2,000 in coaching and courses ready to give away to you, and lots of other workshops. So check it out, and we will see you all soon. Thanks again, Hadassah, for coming on, and thanks to everybody who watched live and watched the replay.
Totally. Thanks for having me, Lauren. Talk to you later. Bye.